Hello, welcome to the Eclectic Reader. Listen to great books and stories while you use your eyes and hands for other things. Now here's your host, Madison Mason.
Hi, Madison Mason here. Can you believe we're up to chapter 28 of The Great Quarry Boys? And it just seems to get better and better. The Great Quarry Boys, chapter 28, Anna Ray Charney. It's me, Todd Kyle, Anna Ray. It's okay. I brought you some food. Can I come in? There was a long moment of decision. Wait a minute, she drawled, almost to herself, and the door closed. Todd dismounted and tied Dino to one of the weathered posts on the dripping porch. He unlashed the food and stood waiting. The leaky porch roof offered little shelter. Finally, the door slid inward as the orange light of a kerosene lantern coated the edges of the entrance. Todd stepped inside, pulling off his mariner's hat as he went. The shack looked to be 3 rooms. The living room was scattered with scraps of furniture discarded by white people over the years. 2 little girls and a baby boy slept on a pallet in one corner. Todd felt like an invader with no business being where he was. Suddenly, the weight of the message he bore felt overpowering. Anna Ray Charney wore a ratty old robe, which she clutched together at her throat. Poverty was stamped on this woman's life like harsh ink on a state document, cruel, permanent, and indelible. She watched him with a deep suspicion born of years of suffering the white man's shenanigans. Whatever reason this boy was here in the night, it wasn't good. What you want? My mom sent this food over here. Todd dropped the tarp on the eating table and unrolled it. Can I put my horse in your barn? It's really pouring out there. Well, go ahead if that dog will let you in, she slurred. Anna Ray's voice was soft as suede, but it was uncaring and didn't give him any feeling of welcome. He grabbed the opportunity to avoid the real matter at hand and left the house. He found a stall in the barn where the roof didn't leak and put Dino in. He wiped the water off the saddle as best he could with his hands, loosening the cinch strap on the saddle and hooking the stirrups over the horn. The only other inhabitant was Willie's ribby mule. The hound growled discontentedly from somewhere deep in the barn, but didn't dare attack. His lesson was hard learned. Dino paid no attention, content to be out of the elements. Todd stuffed hay in the feeder for Dino and stood a moment, also glad to be out of the storm, but more to be free from the suspicious gaze of Anna Ray. As the horse gently cropped the dry fodder, Todd composed in his mind how he would tell her, and tried to imagine her reaction. It scared him. He wished he were home asleep in his warm bed. He took a breath and let it out, a gray cloud in the dark of the barn. In the kitchen, Anna Ray had lit a fire in the pot-belly cook stove that heated the house, but the warm glow didn't make Todd feel any easier about what he had to do. She had spread the food out on the rough table and turned to him, annoyed. It wasn't the reaction he expected. How come you bring me this food? Why your mama send this food over here in the rain? What's going on? Todd swallowed hard and felt like his head would spin off his neck. He heard his words coming out of his mouth, but it didn't sound like him saying them. His voice couldn't be so far away. I don't know how to... Willie's dead, Anna Ray. He drowned tonight, down by the bridge. The creek's like a big river down there now. Anna Ray looked at him blankly. Then she placed the jar of pickled cucumbers ever so gently on the table, as if it were some rare Egyptian artifact. A small hurt sound came from deep inside her and grew into a high-pitched wail that kept coming out in agony and didn't stop until it drove her slowly into the floor, as all the air escaped from her life. Her face contorted in anguish, and she lay on the rough boards, folded like a baby, holding her stomach, and the wild keening sound kept coming as if from centuries back in some dark ancestral past. Todd stood helpless and stupid, not knowing what to do. He had expected her reaction to be more like he'd seen in the movies, brave and stoical, not visceral and so complete in its suffering. This was too real. He was trapped between his desire to run away and the feeling that even though she was a colored woman, he should take her in his arms and hold her. The continuous animal sound set his hair standing on end and gave him chills up the back of his neck. Finally, he knelt beside her and put a comforting hand on her back. He could feel her spine and ribs through the old robe. Her skeleton trembled under his hand. I'm sorry, Anna Ray. I'm sorry. Something moved in the darkness just out of his vision, and a sleepy little girl with wide eyes and a finger in her mouth came to watch the scene. Suddenly, the child let out a screech and started crying in a higher pitch than her mother. This brought the other two children over, and they began howling in sympathetic unison, none of them understanding why. Todd helped Anna Ray to the couch, and she collapsed in grief, little help to the squealing babies who surrounded her in confusion and need. Todd settled miserably onto a hard wooden chair near the stove and watched the poor family in mourning, crushed and impotent. He brought further suffering into a house where there was suffering enough already. The long night grew longer. Grief pronounced itself like a painfully drawn-out sentence, and now abided in the house, alive, present, and tangible. There was nothing Todd, in his inexperience, could offer in the way of comfort other than to be there, share in the anguished passage of time, and throw an occasional chunk of wood on the fire. He felt awkward, powerless, and hated himself for jumping so boyishly, so stupidly now in his opinion, to bring bad news on a bad night. He sat in semi-darkness, alien and alone, and listened to the crying and the rain on the rusted roof. He must have nodded off because the house was quiet when suddenly his head jerked up and he saw Anna Ray standing a few feet away, watching him with dead eyes. She was holding an old, worn butcher knife. The way she stared, so cold, into his eyes gave him fear for his life and the dismal sensation that he should be punished for bringing the message. Of course, why wouldn't she snap and grab a knife or a gun and massacre some dumbass white kid who didn't belong in her house in the first place? Somehow she held him responsible for Willie's death. He forced himself to inhale. "Sun's coming up," she said. "You hungry?" He didn't understand. Hungry sounded like hungry. What? You eat something. Oh, that's okay. Don't bother about me. I'll just start back home now that there's some light. He rose and stretched. He hurt all over and didn't know why. Then it came back to him where he was and what had happened. Todd rubbed his face. It brought him back to present time, and he wondered at all that had passed in just one night. You eat some breakfast before you go back." She got down a pan as he stretched himself awake. The little kids wandered in one by one and stood thumbs in mouths, fingers twirling short, wiry hair, big brown eyes openly staring at this interloper, the first white boy in their short lives ever to enter their home. The kitchen began to fill with the sound and smell of fatback frying and chicory coffee on the boil. Anna Ray went about her business with languid ease, as if it were just another day. She didn't inquire further into Willie's demise, nor evince any interest, as if she accepted God's dealings with equanimity and the realization that it was out of her hands. This was true, but what Todd didn't see was beneath the surface and far beyond his 15-year-old understanding. He couldn't know her embarrassment at expressing her grief in front of a white child, or the years of hard learning that had forged into a fine dishonesty her quiet dignity, powerful, regal pride that hid the suffering of horrid injustice, suffering derived even from well-meaning Christian white folk whose guilty good intentions blindly paved the roads to her hell. Now Todd watched her in stillness, thinking only from his heart, understanding with his soul. He knew nothing of her life, so held his silence. He wanted to stay as much as he wanted to go. When the food came, he ate with the family. Fatback, eggs fried in the grease, and grits. It was crude, good, and filling. No one spoke. The little ones never took their eyes off him, and he stopped himself from thinking of them as cute little pickaninnies. These were now fatherless children in his mind. He knew he would never look on colored people the same again. Now they were only people, nothing different, nothing special, and he was one. It could have been his father dead last night, his mother cooking for one less, wondering how she would ever get along. He wondered that anyone could ever see any difference in us at all. Todd rose as soon as he finished eating and buckled his coat. He had worn it all night. I have to go now, ma'am, he mumbled guiltily. My parents are probably wondering what... He sounded stupid to himself. The sheriff said to tell you he'd be out as soon as the water went down. I'm real sorry, Miss Charney. She nodded as Ty's eyes sought the floor. You be careful going back, and tell your mama I say thank you. Todd nodded and closed the door, grateful to be outside, his painful mission complete.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of The Eclectic Reader. Please go on to the next numbered episode to continue. Also, check us out on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. If you'd like to help support the project, you can donate under Madison Mason at Patreon. And please, check out our website, kltkrdr.com, for more information.
Hi, this is Madison Mason. I want to personally thank you for listening to The Eclectic Reader and invite you to share your experience, your thoughts, and your suggestions. We have many great books lined up for the future, but if you have requests for anything that is in the public domain, please email us at kltkrdr@gmail.com.
kltkrdr@gmail.com